The sound cracked through the living room like lightning striking wood. The burning sensation spread across my cheek as I stumbled sideways, catching myself against the mantel. My hand flew to my face, feeling the heat radiating from where Richard's palm had connected with my skin. The Christmas tree lights blurred through my tears as 14 pairs of eyes stared at me in the sudden silence. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Some looked shocked. Others seemed satisfied. All remained quiet. My husband Richard stood over me, his chest rising and falling with fury. "Do not ever make me look like a fool in front of my family again," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. His mother Betty nodded approvingly from her armchair. His brother Mark smirked behind his wine glass. His sister Linda rolled her eyes as if I had gotten exactly what I deserved. But then, from across the room, came a voice so young yet so steady it could have cut through steel. "Daddy." Every head turned toward my 8-year-old daughter Sophie, who stood by the Christmas tree with her tablet pressed against her chest. Her dark eyes, mirrors of my own, held something that made the entire atmosphere shift. Something that made Richard's confident expression waver. "You should not have done that," Sophie said, her voice calm and eerily controlled for such a small child. "Because now Uncle Mike is going to see everything." The blood drained from Richard's face. His family members exchanged confused looks, but I could see something else creeping into their expressions. A flicker of fear they could not yet understand. "What are you talking about?" Richard demanded, though his voice cracked slightly. Sophie tilted her head, studying her father with the intensity of someone much older. "I've been recording you, Daddy. Everything. For months. And I sent it all to Uncle Mike this morning." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard's family began shifting uncomfortably, suddenly realizing that something had gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. "He told me to tell you," Sophie continued, her small voice carrying the weight of approaching judgment, "that he is on his way over. Right now." That was when their faces went pale. That was when the panic began. 4 hours earlier, I had been standing in the same kitchen, carefully arranging the ham while my hands trembled with exhaustion. The bruise on my shoulder from last Tuesday's lesson still throbbed with every movement, but I could not let it show. Not with Richard's family coming for Christmas dinner. Not when any sign of weakness would become ammunition against me. "Linda, where are my dress shoes?" Richard's voice boomed from upstairs, and I flinched automatically. "In the closet, honey." "Right side, second shelf," I called back, keeping my tone carefully neutral to avoid setting him off. Sophie sat at the kitchen counter, supposedly working on a puzzle, but I knew she was watching me. She always watched now, those intelligent eyes missing nothing. At 8 years old, she had learned to read the warning signs better than I had. The way Richard clenched his jaw when he walked through the door. The particular tone he used before exploding into rage. The deadly quiet that came before his worst moments. "Mom," she said softly, not looking up from her puzzle pieces. "Are you feeling okay?" The question hit me like a physical blow. How many times had she asked me that? How many times had I lied and said everything was fine, that Daddy was just stressed from work, that sometimes grown-ups disagreed but it did not mean anything serious? "I'm fine, sweetheart," I whispered, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. Sophie's small hand stilled on the puzzle. "No, you are not." Before I could respond, Richard's heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs. "Linda, this house looks like a disaster. My family will be here in an hour and you have not even finished setting the table." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Sophie watching him. For a brief moment, something that might have been shame crossed his features, but it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. "Sophie, go to your room," he said curtly. "But Daddy, I am working on my puzzle like you said." "I said go to your room." Sophie gathered her puzzle pieces slowly, deliberately. As she passed by me, she squeezed my hand, a tiny gesture of support that nearly broke my heart. At the kitchen doorway, she paused and looked back at Richard. "Please be nice to Mommy," she said simply. Richard's jaw tightened. "Excuse me. She has been cooking all day, even though she is tired. So just be nice." The boldness of an 8-year-old standing up to her father left Richard momentarily speechless. But I saw the dangerous flash in his eyes, the way his hands clenched into fists. "Sophie, go now," I said quickly, trying to defuse the situation before it escalated. She nodded and disappeared upstairs, but not before I caught the determined set of her jaw, so much like my brother Mike when he was preparing for battle. "That kid is getting too mouthy," Richard muttered, turning his attention back to me. "You are raising her to be disrespectful just like you." "She is just protective," I said carefully. "She does not like seeing." "Seeing what?" His voice dropped to that dangerous whisper that made my blood turn cold. "Are you telling her stories about us, Linda? Are you poisoning my daughter against me?" "No, Richard, I would never do that. Because if you are filling her head with lies about me, there will be serious consequences." "My daughter." As if I had no claim to the child I had carried for 9 months, nursed through every illness, held through every nightmare. The doorbell rang, saving me from having to respond. Richard straightened his tie and transformed instantly into the charming husband and father his family knew and loved. The switch was so seamless it was terrifying. "Showtime," he said with a cold smile. "Remember, we are the perfect family." Richard's family descended on our home like a swarm of well-dressed vultures, each carrying their own collection of cutting remarks and barely concealed insults. His mother Betty swept in first, her critical gaze immediately scanning the house for imperfections. "Oh, Linda dear," she said in that sugary tone that dripped with condescension, "you have done something different with the living room. How interesting." I had spent 3 days rearranging the furniture and adding new decorations for Christmas. Richard's brother Mark arrived with his wife Jessica, both wearing expensive clothes and superior expressions. "Smells good in here," Mark said, then added under his breath, "for once." The real cruelty came from Richard's sister Linda, who made a show of hugging me while whispering, "You look exhausted, Linda. Are you not taking care of yourself? Richard always says tired wives make for unhappy marriages." I forced a smile and nodded, playing my assigned role in this twisted performance. But I noticed Sophie standing in the doorway, her tablet clutched in her hands, those sharp eyes cataloging every slight, every cruel comment, every moment her father failed to defend me. Throughout dinner, the pattern continued. Richard basked in his family's attention while they systematically tore me down with surgical precision. "Linda has always been so simple," Betty said while cutting her ham. "Not much ambition, you know. Richard really settled when he married her, but he is such a generous man for taking care of her." Richard did not contradict her. He never did. "Remember when Linda wanted to go back to college?" His sister laughed. "What was it, teaching?" Richard had to be practical about it. Someone needed to focus on the family. That was not how it happened. I had been accepted into an education program, had dreams of becoming a teacher, of having my own career and independence. Richard had sabotaged my application, told me I was too stupid to succeed, that I would embarrass him by failing. But I said nothing. I smiled and refilled their wine glasses and pretended their words did not slice through me like broken glass. Sophie, however, had stopped eating entirely. She sat rigid in her chair, her small hands clenched in her lap, watching her father's family tear her mother apart piece by piece. The breaking point came when Mark started talking about his wife's new job. "Jessica just got promoted to department head," he announced proudly. "Of course, she has always been the ambitious type, not content to just exist." The word exist hung in the air like a slap. Even Jessica looked uncomfortable with her husband's cruelty. "That is wonderful," I said genuinely, because despite everything, I was happy for any woman succeeding in her career. "It is," Betty chimed in. "It is so refreshing to see a woman with actual drive and intelligence." "Do you not think so, Richard?" Richard's eyes met mine across the table, and I saw the calculation there. The choice between defending his wife or maintaining his family's approval. He chose them. He always chose them. "Absolutely," he said, raising his glass. "To strong, successful women." The toast was not for me. It was never for me. I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe, to collect the pieces of my dignity that lay scattered across the dining room floor. Through the doorway, I could hear them continuing their assault in my absence. She has gotten so sensitive lately, Richard was saying. Honestly, I do not know how much more drama I can take. You are a saint for putting up with it, his mother replied. That was when Sophie's voice cut through their laughter like a blade. Why do you all hate my mom? The dining room fell silent. Sophie, honey, Richard's voice was strained. We do not hate. Yes, you do, Sophie interrupted, her voice steady and clear. You say mean things about her. You make her sad. You make her cry when you think I am not looking. I pressed myself against the kitchen wall, my heart hammering in my chest. Sweetheart, Betty's voice was sickeningly sweet. Sometimes adults have complicated. My mom is the smartest person I know, Sophie continued, gathering momentum. She helps me with my homework every night. She reads me stories and knows about everything. She is kind to everyone, even when they are mean to her, even when they do not deserve it. The silence stretched taut. She cooks your food and cleans up after you and smiles when you hurt her feelings because she is trying to make everyone happy. But none of you even see her. You just see someone to be mean to. Sophie, that is enough, Richard's voice held a warning. No, Daddy. It is not enough. It is not enough that you make Mom sad. It is not enough that you yell at her and call her stupid. It is not enough that you hurt her. My blood turned to ice. She had seen more than I thought, more than I ever wanted her to see. I heard a chair scrape back violently. Go to your room right now. Richard's voice was deadly quiet. I do not want to. Said now. The sound of his palms striking the table made everyone jump. That was when I rushed back into the dining room, unable to let my daughter face his anger alone. Richard, please, I said, stepping between him and Sophie. She is just a child. She does not understand. Does not understand what? His eyes were blazing now. His composure finally cracking in front of his family. Does not understand that her mother is a pathetic, worthless. Do not call her that. Sophie's voice rose, fierce and protective. Do not you dare call my mom names. I will call her whatever I want, Richard roared, advancing on both of us. This is my house, my family, and I will. You will what? I found myself saying, my own breaking point finally reached. Hit an 8-year-old in front of your family. Show them what you really are. The room went deadly silent. Richard's family stared at us, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in their minds. Richard's face contorted with rage. How dare you? He whispered. How dare you make me look like what you are? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Like someone who hurts his wife. Like someone who terrorizes his own child. That was when his hand came up. That was when the world exploded into pain and humiliation and the crushing weight of public betrayal. And that was when Sophie stepped forward and changed everything forever. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video from. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more incredible revenge stories to life. Enjoy the rest of the story. 2 months earlier, Mom, can you help me with my school project? I looked up from the pile of medical bills I had been sorting, bills from the urgent care visit where I told the doctors I had fallen down the stairs. Sophie stood in the doorway of my bedroom, her tablet in her hands and an expression I could not quite read on her face. Course, sweetheart. What is the project about? Family relationships, she said carefully. We have to document how families communicate and interact with each other. Something in her tone made me uneasy. What do you mean, document? Take videos, record conversations, show examples of how family members treat each other. Her eyes met mine, dark and serious. Mrs. Patterson says it is important to understand what healthy families look like versus other kinds. My heart clenched. Sophie's teacher had always been perceptive, always asked the right questions when Sophie came to school with shadows under her eyes or flinched when adults raised their voices. Sophie, I began carefully. You know that some things that happen in families are private, right? Not everything needs to be shared or recorded. I know, she said, but there was something in her voice, a determination that reminded me so strongly of my brother Mike. It took my breath away. But Mrs. Patterson says documenting things can be important for understanding. For protection. The word protection hung between us like a loaded weapon. That night, after Richard had screamed at me for buying the wrong brand of bread and slammed our bedroom door so hard it shook the house, Sophie appeared in my doorway. "Mom," she whispered. "Are you okay?" I was sitting on my bed, holding an ice pack to my wrist where he had grabbed me, leaving finger-shaped bruises that would be hidden under long sleeves tomorrow. "I'm fine, baby," I lied automatically. Sophie stepped into the room and closed the door softly behind her. "Mom, I need to tell you something." Something in her voice made me look up. She seemed older suddenly, carrying a weight no child should bear. "I have been thinking," she said, climbing onto the bed beside me, "about my project. About families. Sophie. I know Daddy hurts you," she said quietly, the words falling between us like stones into still water. My throat closed. "Sweetheart, sometimes adults." "Mrs. Patterson showed us a video," Sophie interrupted, "about families where people get hurt. She said if we ever see anything like that we should tell someone. Someone who can help." "Sophie, you cannot." "I've been recording, Mom." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" Sophie's small hands trembled as she held up her tablet. "I have been recording him when he is mean to you. When he yells. When he hurts you. I have videos, Mom. Lots of them." Horror and hope warred in my chest. "Sophie, you cannot. If your father finds out." "He will not," she said with frightening certainty. "I am careful. I am really, really careful." She opened her tablet and showed me a folder labeled Family Project. Inside were dozens of video files, each one time-stamped and dated. "Sophie, this is dangerous. If he catches you." "Mom," she said, her small hand covering mine. "I will not let him hurt you anymore. Have a plan." The look in her eyes, ancient and determined and absolutely fearless, chilled me to the bone. "What kind of plan?" Sophie was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the bedspread. "Uncle Mike always said that bullies only understand one thing. My brother, of course." Sophie adored my brother Mike, called him every week, listened with rapt attention to his stories about justice and courage and standing up for what was right. He was a police detective, a man who had dedicated his life to protecting people, and had never backed down from a fight in his life. "Sophie, you cannot involve Uncle Mike. This is between your father and me." "No, it is not," she said firmly. "It is about our family. Our real family. And Uncle Mike always says family protects family." Over the next month, I watched my 8-year-old daughter become someone I barely recognized. She was still sweet, still my baby, but there was steel in her spine that had not been there before. She moved through the house like a tiny soldier on a mission, documenting every cruel word, every raised hand, every moment Richard showed his true nature. She was careful, devastatingly careful. The tablet was always positioned innocuously, propped against books or hidden behind picture frames. She never filmed for long, just captured the worst moments and then stopped. Richard never suspected that his own daughter was building a case against him, piece by damning piece. I tried to stop her twice. The first time she simply said, "Mom, someone has to protect us." The second time she showed me a video of Richard shoving me against the wall so hard it knocked a picture off its hook. "Look at yourself," she said quietly. "Look how small you make yourself. Look how scared you are." In the video, I was indeed cowering, trying to make myself invisible as Richard towered over me. His face twisted with rage over something trivial I had forgotten to record his favorite television show. "This is not love, Mom," Sophie said with heartbreaking wisdom. "Love does not look like this." 3 weeks before Christmas, Sophie made her first call to Uncle Mike. I only found out because I walked past her room to say goodnight and heard her small voice through the door. "Uncle Mike, what would you do if someone was hurting Mom?" My blood froze. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" My brother's voice was gentle but alert, the way it got when he sensed trouble. "Just hypothetically. If someone was being really mean to her, really, really mean, what would you do?" There was a long pause. "Sophie, is your mom okay? Is someone bothering her?" "It is just a question, Uncle Mike. For my school project." Another pause. Well, hypothetically, anyone who hurt your mother would have to answer to me. You know that, right? Your mom is my sister, and I will always protect her. Always. Even if it was someone in our family. Especially then, my brother's voice was steel. Family does not hurt family, Sophie. Real family protects each other. Okay, Sophie said. And I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. That is what I thought. The next morning, Sophie showed me a text message on her tablet. She had sent my brother a simple note starting to worry about Mom. Can you help? His response was immediate always. Call me anytime. I love you both. He is ready, Sophie said simply. Ready for what? Sophie looked at me with those ancient eyes. To save us. The morning of Christmas dinner, Sophie was unusually calm. While I rushed around making last-minute preparations, she sat at the breakfast table methodically eating her cereal and watching Richard with an intensity that should have been disturbing in a child. Richard was already on edge. His family's visits always brought out the worst in him, the need to appear in control, the pressure to maintain his image as the successful husband and father. He had already snapped at me 4 times before 10 o'clock. Once for using the wrong napkins, twice for breathing too loudly, and once for existing in his general vicinity. Remember, he said, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror, today we are the perfect family. Loving husband, devoted wife, well-behaved child. Can you manage that, Linda? Yes, I whispered. And you? He turned to Sophie. No more of that attitude you have been showing lately. Children should be seen and not heard when adults are talking. Sophie nodded solemnly. Understand, Daddy. Something about her easy compliance should have warned him. But Richard was too focused on his own performance to notice the calculating look in his daughter's eyes. His family arrived in waves, each member bringing their own special brand of poison. They settled into our living room like they owned it, immediately beginning their ritual of systematic humiliation. Linda, dear, Betty said, accepting a glass of wine, you really should do something about those roots. Richard works so hard to provide for you. The least you could do is take care of your appearance. Richard laughed. Actually laughed. Mom is right. I keep telling her she is letting herself go. I felt the familiar burn of shame, but when I glanced at Sophie, I saw her small fingers moving across her tablet screen, recording. The afternoon continued in much the same pattern. Every time I entered a room, the conversation would shift to subtle attacks about my appearance, my intelligence, my worth as a wife and mother. And every time, Richard either joined in or remained silent. His complicity more devastating than outright cruelty. But Sophie was documenting it all. During dinner, as Richard carved the ham with theatrical precision, his family launched into their most vicious attack yet. You know, Mark said, Jessica and I were just saying how fortunate Richard is that you are so accommodating, Linda. Some wives would make a fuss about, well, everything. What do you mean? I asked, though I knew I should not have. His sister Linda giggled. Oh, come on. The way you just accept everything. Never fight back. Never stand up for yourself. It is almost admirable how completely you have given up. She knows her place, Richard said, and the cruel satisfaction in his voice made something inside me finally snap. My place. I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Linda. Richard's voice held a warning, but I could not stop. 4 years of accumulated humiliation, of swallowed pride, of protecting my daughter from a truth that was destroying us both, it all came pouring out. My place is to cook your food and clean your messes and smile while your family tells me how worthless I am. My place is to disappear while you take credit for everything I do and blame me for everything that goes wrong. Richard's face went white, then red. Linda, stop. My place is to pretend I do not see Sophie watching while you. That was when he stood up. That was when his hand came up. That was when everything changed forever. The slap echoed through the room like thunder. Time seemed to slow as I stumbled backward, my cheek burning, my vision blurring with tears of pain and shock. But it was not the physical pain that destroyed me. It was the look of satisfaction on his family's faces. The way they nodded as if I had finally gotten what I deserved. Richard stood over me, breathing hard, his hand still raised. Do not ever embarrass me in front of my family again, he snarled. The dining room was silent except for the sound of my ragged breathing and the tick of the clock on the wall. 14 pairs of eyes stared at me, some shocked, others satisfied, all waiting to see what would happen next. That was when Sophie stepped forward. "Daddy." Her voice was so calm, so controlled that it sent chills down my spine. Richard turned toward her, his anger still blazing, ready to unleash his fury on anyone who dared challenge him. "What?" he snapped. Sophie stood by the Christmas tree, her tablet clutched against her chest like armor. Her dark eyes were fixed on her father with an intensity that made the air in the room shift. "You should not have done that," she said, her voice steady and eerily calm for a child. Richard's anger faltered for just a moment, confusion flickering across his features. "What are you talking about?" Sophie tilted her head, studying him with the cold assessment of a predator sizing up its prey. "Because now Uncle Mike is going to see everything." The change in the room was immediate and electric. Richard's confident posture crumbled. His family exchanged confused glances, but I saw something else creeping into their expressions, a flicker of fear they could not yet name. "What are you talking about?" Richard demanded, but his voice cracked on the last word. Sophie held up her tablet, the screen glowing in the dim dining room light. "I've been recording you, Daddy. Everything. For months." Betty gasped. Mark choked on his wine. Linda's fork clattered to her plate. But Sophie was not finished. "I recorded you calling Mom stupid. I recorded you pushing her down. I recorded you throwing things at her. I recorded you making her cry." Her voice never wavered, never lost that terrifying calm. "And I sent it all to Uncle Mike this morning." Richard's face went through a series of colors, red to white to gray, as the implications hit him. My brother was not just Sophie's beloved uncle. He was Detective Mike Thompson, a decorated police officer with connections throughout the department and the legal system. "Ugh." Richard started toward Sophie, his hand raised. "I would not," Sophie said, not moving an inch. "Because Uncle Mike said to tell you something." Richard froze mid-step. "He said to tell you that he has reviewed all the evidence. He said to tell you that real men do not hurt women and children. He said to tell you that bullies who hide behind closed doors are cowards." The tablet chimed with an incoming message. Sophie glanced at the screen and smiled a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "And he said to tell you," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout, "that he is on his way. Right now." The effect was immediate and devastating. Richard's family began talking at once, voices overlapping in panic. "Richard, what is she talking about? You said they were just arguments. If there are videos, if a police detective sees them, we cannot be associated with this." Richard held up his hands, trying to regain control, but the damage was done. The mask had slipped, and his family was seeing him clearly for the first time. "It is not what it sounds like," he said desperately. "Sophie is just a kid. She does not understand what she is saying." "I understand that you hit my mom," Sophie said, her voice cutting through his excuses like a knife. "I understand that you scare her. I understand that you make her feel small and worthless because it makes you feel big and important." She paused, looking around the room at Richard's family with withering disdain. "And I understand that all of you knew and did not care because it was easier to pretend Mom was the problem." Betty's face had gone ashen. "Sophie, surely you do not think we would support." "You called her stupid." Sophie's voice was relentless, cataloging every cruelty with perfect recall. "You called her worthless. You said Daddy married down. You said she was lucky he put up with her. You made her smaller every time you came here. You helped him break her." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard was staring at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time, and what he saw clearly terrified him. This was not the quiet, obedient child he thought he knew. This was someone who had been watching, learning, planning. "How long?" he whispered. "How long what, Daddy? How long have you been recording me?" Sophie consulted her tablet with clinical precision. 62 days, 14 hours, and 23 minutes of video footage. Audio recordings of another 35 incidents. The numbers hit the room like physical blows. Richard's brother Mark was openly staring, his mouth hanging open. His wife Jessica had tears in her eyes. "Jesus, Richard," Mark breathed. "What have you done?" "I have not done anything," Richard exploded, his composure finally shattering completely. "She is lying. She is a manipulative little..." Sophie calmly turned her tablet around, showing the screen to the room. On it, clear as day, was a video of Richard grabbing me by the arms and shaking me while screaming about the house being messy. "This was last Tuesday," Sophie said conversationally. "Would you like to see Wednesday? Or maybe Thursday when you threw the book at Mom's head?" Richard lunged for the tablet, but Sophie was ready. She darted behind my chair, her finger hovering over the screen. "I would not," she said calmly. "This is all backed up. Cloud storage. Uncle Mike's phone. Mrs. Patterson's email. The police station's evidence system." Richard froze. "The police?" Uncle Mike insisted. Sophie said matter-of-factly. "He said documentation is important for when bad people need consequences." That was when we heard it. The rumble of engines in the driveway. Car doors slamming. Heavy footsteps on the front porch. Sophie smiled. "He is here." The front door did not just open, it erupted inward as if blown apart by the force of righteous fury itself. My brother Mike filled the doorway like an avenging angel, his detective badge clearly visible on his belt. Behind him stood two other men I recognized from family gatherings, both police officers, both wearing expressions that could have melted steel. The dining room fell silent except for the sound of Betty's wine glass shattering on the floor. Detective Mike Thompson surveyed the room with the cold efficiency of a man who had seen every kind of human cruelty. His eyes took in everything: my red cheek, Richard's guilty posture, his family-stricken faces, and Sophie standing protectively beside me with her tablet still clutched in her hands. "Detective Thompson," Richard stammered, his bravado evaporating like smoke. "This is unexpected. We were not." "Sit down," my brother said quietly. The command carried such authority that Richard actually took a step backward, but he did not sit. "Sir, I think there has been some misunderstanding." I said, "Sit down." This time, Richard's knees buckled and he collapsed into his chair. His family remained frozen, afraid to move or speak. Mike stepped into the room, his companions flanking him like honor guards. "Sophie," he said gently, his voice transforming completely when he addressed his niece. "Are you all right?" "Yes, Uncle Mike," she said, running to him. He scooped her up in one arm while keeping his lethal gaze fixed on Richard. "And your mother?" Sophie's eyes flicked to my burning cheek. "She is hurt, Uncle Mike." Again. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mike set Sophie down carefully and approached me, his trained eyes cataloging every visible injury with clinical precision. When he gently touched my cheek, examining the handprint Richard had left there, his jaw clenched so tight I heard his teeth grind. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long, Linda?" I could not lie to him. Not with Sophie watching, not with the evidence displayed so clearly on my face. "For years." The words hung in the air like an execution sentence. Mike turned slowly to face Richard, and I had never seen him look more dangerous. Not in his most intimidating arrest photos, not in his toughest case stories. Nothing compared to the controlled fury radiating from him now. "For years," he repeated, his voice conversational. "For years you have been putting your hands on my sister." "Sir, it is not what you think," Richard began. "For years you have been terrorizing my niece." "I never touched Sophie. I would never." "You think because you did not hit her you did not hurt her." Mike's voice rose slightly, and Richard actually whimpered. "You think a child can watch her mother being abused and not be damaged. You think what you have done to this family is not a crime against that little girl." Richard's mother finally found her voice. "Detective Thompson, surely we can discuss this like civilized adults." Mike's gaze shifted to her and she immediately fell silent. "Mrs. Coleman," he said politely, Your son has been physically and emotionally abusing my sister while you sat in this very room and called her worthless. Your entire family has enabled and encouraged his behavior. You are complicit in every bruise, every tear, every night my niece went to bed afraid. Betty's face crumpled. We did not know. You knew, Sophie said quietly from beside me. You just did not care because it was not happening to you. One of Mike's companions, Officer Rodriguez, stepped forward and placed a tablet on the dining table. We have reviewed all the evidence, he said formally. Video documentation of domestic violence, audio recordings of threats and verbal abuse, photographic evidence of injuries, medical records showing repeated emergency room visits. Richard's face had gone completely white. Those are private medical records. You cannot access those. Your wife signed releases for everything, Rodriguez continued calmly. She has the right to share her own medical information, especially when it documents crimes against her. Crimes. Richard's voice cracked. Mike stepped closer to Richard's chair. His presence overwhelming. Assault and battery, domestic violence, terroristic threatening, harassment, intimidation of witnesses. Witnesses. Richard looked confused. Your daughter. Wife. Anyone who saw the bruises and injuries you caused. Mike's voice was clinical now, methodical. Sophie's teacher reported her concerns to Child Protective Services 2 months ago. There is already an open file. The room was spinning. I had no idea Sophie's teacher had taken it that far. Had no idea there were official records, formal complaints. The question Mike continued is what happens next. Richard's family was exchanging panicked glances, finally understanding the magnitude of the situation they had helped create. What do you want? Richard whispered, and the desperation in his voice was almost pathetic. Mike smiled, but there was no warmth in it. What I want is to take you outside and show you exactly what it feels like to be helpless and afraid. What I want is to make you understand the terror you have put my family through. Richard shrank deeper into his chair. But what I am going to do, Mike continued, is let the law handle you. Because unlike you, I believe in justice, not revenge. He nodded to his other companion, who I now recognized as Officer Martinez from the Domestic Violence Unit. She stepped forward with a folder in her hands. Mr. Coleman, she said formally, I am here to serve you with a temporary restraining order. You are ordered to have no contact with your wife or daughter. You are ordered to vacate this residence immediately. This is my house, Richard exploded, desperation making him stupid. Actually, Officer Martinez consulted her papers. The house is in both your names, but given the circumstances and the evidence of domestic violence, your wife has been granted temporary exclusive occupancy. Richard turned to his family, looking for support, but found only horrified faces turned away from him. Mom, he pleaded. You cannot believe. I have seen the videos, Richard, Betty said quietly, tears streaming down her face. We all have. Your father would be ashamed. Mark stood up slowly, his face gray. Jessica and I need to leave. We cannot be associated with this. You are my family. Richard shouted, his voice breaking. No, his sister Linda said, standing as well. Family does not do what you have done. Family protects each other. As Richard's relatives filed out of the house like mourners leaving a funeral, Mike turned his attention to Sophie and me. Pack a bag, he said gently. Both of you. You are coming home with me tonight. But this is our home, I protested weakly. This was your prison, Sophie said with startling clarity. Uncle Mike's house is home. Richard was still sitting at the table, staring at the wreckage of his life. Linda, he said desperately. Please. Can change. Can get help. Do not destroy our family over this. Over what? I found my voice finally, the words coming stronger than they had in years. Over you hitting me. Over you terrorizing our daughter. Over 4 years of making us afraid to exist in our own home. It was not that bad. Daddy, Sophie interrupted, her voice sad now instead of angry. I have 62 days of recordings that say it was exactly that bad. Richard looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and seemed to finally understand what he had lost. Not just a wife, not just a house, but the respect and love of the one person who should have looked up to him most. "Sophie, I am your father," he said brokenly. "No," she said with devastating finality. "Fathers protect their families. Fathers make their children feel safe. You are just the man who used to live here." 8 months later, Sophie and I sat in our new apartment, small but bright, with windows that let in actual sunlight and doors that we could lock without fear of who might come through them. The restraining order had held. Richard had been convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by mandatory counseling and supervised visitation with Sophie if she chose to see him. Sophie had not asked to see him yet. The divorce had been swift and decisive. Richard's family, horrified by the public nature of his crimes and terrified of their own legal exposure, had pressured him not to contest anything. I got the house, which I immediately sold. I got half of everything plus substantial support payments. More importantly, I got my life back. "Mom," Sophie said from her spot on the couch where she was doing homework, "Mrs. Patterson wants to know if you will speak to her class about courage." I looked up from my college textbooks. Yes, I was finally pursuing that teaching degree Richard had convinced me I was too stupid to earn. What would I say? Sophie considered this seriously. Maybe that being strong does not mean staying quiet. Maybe that protecting someone sometimes means being brave enough to ask for help. My 8-year-old daughter, who had orchestrated the downfall of a grown man through pure strategic thinking and unwavering determination, was giving me advice about courage. "What about you?" I asked. "Are you okay with everything that happened?" Sophie set down her pencil and looked at me with those ancient eyes that had seen too much but somehow remained clear and hopeful. "Mom, do you remember what you used to say when I had nightmares? You would tell me that brave people are not the ones who are not scared. Brave people are the ones who are scared but do the right thing anyway." I nodded, remembering countless nights when I had whispered those words while she trembled in my arms after hearing us fight. "You were brave," she said simply. "You stayed to protect me even when staying hurt you. And I was brave because I knew I had to protect you. We protected each other." Tears blurred my vision. "I should have left sooner. I should have." "Mom," Sophie interrupted gently. "You left when you were ready. You left when it was safe. You left when you knew we would be okay." She was right. Of course, my brilliant, remarkable daughter was right. The truth was, I had not left. We had escaped. And we had escaped because an 8-year-old girl had been braver and smarter and more strategic than any adult in the situation. She had seen what needed to happen and made it happen, methodically and carefully and with devastating effectiveness. "Do you miss him?" I asked quietly. "Your father." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "I miss the idea of having a daddy who loved us. But I do not miss being afraid all the time. I do not miss watching you get smaller and sadder every day. I do not miss him at all." She paused, then added, "But I like who you are now. You are getting bigger again." She was right about that too. I was getting bigger, stronger, louder. I laughed more. I slept better. I had opinions again, dreams again, hopes for the future again. "Mom," Sophie's voice was small now, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. "Do you think other kids have to do what I did? Record their parents and make plans and all of that?" The question broke my heart. "Hope not, baby. I really hope not. But if they do," she said, her voice growing stronger, "I want them to know they can. That they are not tattling or being bad. That sometimes kids have to save their families because the adults cannot." I set aside my textbooks and pulled her into my arms. This child who had saved us both. "You know what, Sophie?" "What?" "I think you might be the bravest person I have ever known." She snuggled against me, and for a moment, she was just my little girl again, not the strategic mastermind who had brought down her abuser with military precision. "I learned it from Uncle Mike," she said. "And from you. You just forgot for a while." Outside our apartment windows, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Tomorrow I had classes and Sophie had school. And we both had therapy appointments where we continued to process everything that had happened. But tonight we were safe. We were free. We were home. And Richard was exactly where he belonged, paying the consequences for his choices, stripped of his power, his family, and his victims. Sometimes justice looks like an 8-year-old girl with a tablet and a plan. Sometimes revenge is just letting the truth speak for itself. 4 years later, Sophie is now 12. I still have all the videos. Mom thinks I deleted them after the trial, but I did not. They are stored in 4 different places now, encrypted and password protected. Mrs. Patterson, who is now Principal Patterson, taught me about digital security and evidence preservation. She says I have good instincts for justice. Mom graduated from college last year. She works as a teacher now, helping other families who might be struggling. She is good at seeing the signs, good at asking the right questions, good at helping people find their courage. She tells them about a little girl who saved her family with a tablet and a lot of patience. Uncle Mike says I have the makings of a good detective. He is teaching me about investigation techniques and standing up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. Richard gets out of prison next month. He writes me letters sometimes, asking for forgiveness, asking for a chance to be a father again. I do not write back. Mom says I might change my mind when I am older, when I have more perspective. Maybe she is right, but right now I remember everything. I remember being 8 years old and watching my mother shrink a little more each day. I remember making a choice to save us both. And I remember that bullies only understand consequences. He had 18 months to learn what consequences feel like. Whether that is enough time for him to become a better person, well, that is up to him. But he will never get the chance to hurt us again. I made sure of that. Sometimes at school, kids ask me about what happened. The story made the news for a while. 8-year-old documents stepfather's abuse. Leads to conviction. Most kids think it is amazing that I helped catch a bad guy. Some kids ask me if I feel bad about getting my dad in trouble. I tell them I did not get him in trouble. He got himself in trouble by making bad choices. I just made sure those choices had consequences. Principal Patterson says that is a very mature way to think about it. Mom says that is a very me way to think about it. Uncle Mike says that is a very Thompson way to think about it. Thompsons protect their own, and they do not back down from bullies. I think they are all right. Last week, a girl in my class told me her mom's boyfriend hits her mom. She asked me what she should do. I gave her my old tablet, the one with a good camera, and taught her how to use the recording app. Just remember, I told her, you are not tattling. You are gathering evidence. And evidence is power. She nodded very seriously, the way I probably looked when I was 8 and making my own plans. Will you help me? She asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. But you have to be very, very careful. 'Cause that is what we do. That is what our family does. We protect each other and we protect people who need protecting. And bullies learn that the Thompson family does not forget. And we do not forgive people who hurt the ones we love. We just make sure they face consequences.